So I've pulled the auxiliary valve off of this International 1586, and it's a bit of a chore, and there's no way around it. You're gonna get dirty. You got to pull the staircase off the passenger side. You'll have a hard pipe right here that goes up to your sump, and then you got the supercharge line goes over to the multi-control valve. You got your 4 hard pipes for your A and B ports on your spools, spool 1 and 2. You got to undo your linkages, and there's 2 hoses that go to the back. One of them you can't get at without pulling the tank, so you unscrew it at the valve end, and it's kind of a chore. And the other one, I unscrew it up at the top above the hitch and bring the hose out with it. So obviously it has to be fished back in there. There's 3 bolts that hold the mount to the side of the chassis, and it's pretty darn heavy. It's actually really heavy. If you don't have good shoulders, you might be better taking the sectional valve, the 4 bolts out of it, and taking the sections apart to bring it down without so much weight. But right now what I'm going to do is pull the handle down, because these handles, the valve control levers, so up in the cab you got your control levers for your hitch draft and your auxiliary valve. Well, all the crap from 40-50 years of dust and dirt accumulates down in there, and then those pivot points right here, they rust. You can spray them and get them loosened up, but I could not get that other one budged. And while the valve is out, this is the second time I've had the valve out. I should have messed with it the first time. I'm going to try to pull that whole assembly straight down out of the floor. I think that's how it comes out, and see if I can't really solve it and grease it up once and for all. If you're ever in a position where you're going to pull the valve down, especially if there's oil dripping to the exterior of that valve, it's a sectional control valve, so it's got sections that are bolted together, and there's 3 O-rings between each section. If any one of those O-rings fails, which rubber only lasts so long, so if any of those O-rings fail, you're going to have pressure leaking back to tank. I'm not going to suggest that there aren't lots of other reasons that this thing can have low pressure. This is a kind of a complicated tractor. There's a lot of points where a failed O-ring will give you low pressure in your auxiliary, in your loader. You know, if you got a front end loader, if you got a batwing mower off the back, whatever it is, you should have 2,500 psi in your auxiliary, and it's very easy for a number of different problems. Some of them which are inside the rear end case that require pulling the tank, pulling the top of the lift arm hitch assembly to get into all the draft control, unloader valve type stuff. The unloader valve you can get to from the outside, but the relief valve, the unloader valve, and the auxiliary valve spool sections, you can access that all from the outside, but the other stuff is in the interior, which my customer has elected not to go any further with this, since I've got it working well enough that it can suit his purpose for a while until he sells it. So let me get into it. All right, so I just pulled these bolts, or these 6 bolts around this perimeter, and all it did was take down these little like dust wipers, which seems at the moment seems a little silly to me, because it really seems like all it's done is help that dust and junk stay up on the top side, which is causing the problem. So if that's all that those things do, I'm not going to reinstall them. I would much rather those holes allow rubbish to fall through as the tractor vibrates along and hopefully drops some of that sand out. I would actually increase that clearance space so that it drops that trash out. Lets air up and through there, keeps the moisture from staying, because this machine's got a broken window, so when it rains, the rain gets in there. Not doing any kind of favors. So moving forward, let's see. It's a bit of a challenge. You got to get up in there with a 9/16 ratchet wrench, because there's no room for ratchet head, and the inner row of bolts are closer to the carriage, and you get them out and you pop these little rubber handle covers off, and you slide your valve control shafts, you slide them out through the bottom like that, and that's going to let me get in there and clean them up and grease them. There's a snap ring, snap ring on each end, so I'll tear them down. Well, these 2 levers are just really gummed up. Even though I got them loosened and freed not too long ago, they've already, one of them is totally seized, and one of them is pretty darn sticky and close to getting seized. So I'm going to tear these apart and sort that out. I thought I was going to be able to just work these off, but I'm actually going to have to use a press. It's stuck in there pretty good. So you can see this handle's all twisted and torqued and so forth. When you move this lever, this one was moving with it, but it was bending all the linkage rods. I wish I caught it sooner, because that might have something to do with the problem I'm having on the machine overall. So we'll see. So I put it in the press and started pushing down on it right there, and it obviously started crushing that open eyelet. So I thought, dang, I better do something different. The next thing, I put the oxyacetylene heat to it, got the whole thing cooking hot, and I just quenched it in motor oil to try to work some lubrication in there, and it is going in the right direction. This is as free as it's ever been, and this one is starting to work loose. Maybe I can keep going like this and not have to take it apart, but at this point I don't see how I could get that pin out right now, so we'll keep working at it. All right, I got the one off, and for my own records, this writing faces the seat. This lever's for the hitch, and that lever's for the draft control. They look like that, so I don't get it wrong. Now, here's how you get pins unfroze. People always think that you heat the female. That's not it. You heat the male. The male mechanically expands to maximum. So the male, you heat it over here, and as that color leaves, where do you think it goes? Yeah, it goes into the air, but it also travels up the part. So it goes into the male on the interior of that female bore, which causes the male to physically swell. That physical expansion of a few thousandths is what mechanically breaks this female open. It flares that female open, and then as the female heats up, the male gives off its heat and contracts. So this male pin, let's say this is a 750 thousandths male pin. You heat that bad boy up, and maybe it grows to 752, 753, 751, somewhere in there. And then it shrinks back down to 750, while this one has been mechanically forced open. And guess what? It breaks loose. No problem. So that's, in my opinion, that's how you do that. I'm gonna go quench it in some oil. That'll help me get it apart, and then I gotta go run and do some other chores. Well, I got this redone up in here. You can see what a difference. I gotta do the other one. So this little U-bolt, this little U-bracket is actually drilled and tapped and threaded, and then this adjustment linkage travels in 180 increments, 180 degree increments at a time to adjust the distance, and then this is just a jam nut, but it's completely stripped out. So I'm going to be welding that jam nut to this here, so that that huge amount of play is taking up all the spool travel. So, well, I got these handles back up in here, and this now travels like what I believe it should, nice and easy. And I think I've got the adjustment pretty well centered up. I don't know what this, it says response right here, I think. And it seems like it bounces back on its own right there. Well, actually, I guess there's quite a bit of play in that worn out ball joint linkage, but it goes all the way up to the top pretty well. And it seems like it comes all the way back down, so I'm gonna have to have the machine running to tell if I've got that quite right, and it can still be adjusted easily. It's down here, you'll see these slots. So these linkage arms right there, they go into slots in these levers. I've moved that one on the right, I've moved around 3 or 4 times to get it where I think it's best, but I won't know until I can watch the implement lift arms go up and down. And then there's one more part over here. So this other, I try to create some shade so you can see. Yeah, this contrast is terrible, but anyway, you can get a socket up in there. There's an adjustment bolt right at the top where my finger's going. These are the rockers. There's 2 levers right here, and they each have an individual cinch bolt to adjust how much tension is on them. So if your lift arm handle's going up and down, then or if it's falling down on its own, you can snug that up and it'll hold in its own position. And now I'm putting this other handle back up in here. You can see that shaft rolls perfect, that the levers will move independently, and I just put a little bit of weld, some booger weld on that. It's a bit of a bear getting this valve back up in here, and I got this last hard pipe, and it's just, you're trying to get all these angles lined up, and this one hard pipe's just got a tiny bit of an off angle to it. And this adapter fitting, which is JIC male and SAE O-ring male, goes up in the valve like that. And that flare nut, now I can change this. I'd be in bad way if I have to change that flare nut. It's starting to cross thread, and the focus on this camera is about as good as the focus on my eyeballs. When I'm 10 inches away, I cannot focus my eyes. But right there where my thumbnail is, it's starting to cross thread. So I'm going to file that with a 60-degree V file, clean that thread, and then I'm going to seat it. I'm going to pull this down and get it threaded into here, and then thread up into there so that they're both loose together. Finish that, tightening the adapter up in there, and then jam that lock nut. And I hope that I can get it threaded without messing anything up. But man, I'm ready to be done with this job. The valve's all up and connected, and now I just gotta connect those two levers on the right hand side. Gotta be connected to those two spools right there. If I move my hand, the sun will hit the camera and cause it to wig out, so I can't point it out to you, but I think you get where I'm going with this. Got all that working really nice, much easier. You know, you can really one finger move these now, where they used to be pretty well jammed up. And this is going easy like it should. This one before was completely stuck, and now it's smooth as butter. So that was worth the effort. It was kind of a bit of a pain in the butt, but it was worth the effort.